School of Speech is presented by Speech Therapy PD. And I want to personally thank everybody that is here today. And a special welcome to those that are joining us on Speech Therapy PD's channel of YouTube. I'd like to introduce myself. I am Carolyn Dolby. I am a practicing speech language clinician in the schools, and my dream job is hosting School of Speech. Today, our episode is titled Finding the Balance, Group Size and School-Based Language Outcomes with our special guest, Carrie Hutchins. So as we all kind of settle in, as we kind of settle in, I want to remind everyone that every episode of School of Speech is offered for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. I'm going to just go over some disclosures. We are so thankful Carrie's here with us, and she is going to be receiving an honorarium from Speech Therapy PD for her participation today. Non-financial, she is a member of ASHA, Special Interest Groups 1, 10, and 16. And for me, I am a salaried employee of Portland Public Schools here in Portland, Oregon. And I get compensated from the graduate courses that I teach for universities. And I also receive compensation from Speech Therapy PD for hosting School of Speech dream job. Non-financial for me, I do consult for districts regarding feeding and swallowing. That's my jam. And I'm also ASHA member of 13, 14, and 16. Enough about me. I'm going to give you a little lowdown on Carrie. She earned both her BS and MS degrees in Communication Sciences and Disorder from Western Kentucky University. She has nearly 15 years as a school-based clinician. That's why we love you. And she is passionate about school-based language intervention, also professional issues, and also issues related to education policy. She is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Texas. A shout out. I spent 25 years in Texas. Woo! Love it. She's in Austin. And her research interests include understanding the influential role of the environment, meaning home, social, and education environment, and the implementation of language and literacy interventions for children with language disorders. And get this, people, in the public school. If this isn't perfect for all of us. Hi, Carrie.
Hello. Thank you for that introduction.
Hey,
at heart, I am a school SLP.
Yeah, heard that. Carrie, how about take us on your journey? How did you get here?
Sure. So I honestly went into university as a engineering major. Very quickly realized that was not my jam. Was not good at that. Did not do well in those classes.
That's a lot of
So
math,
I had
man.
a friend who was a lot of math. So I had a friend who was taking an intro to SLP class, and I said, I've never heard of that. I want to learn more. And I got sucked in. So I'm really interested. I knew I was interested in psychology and learning, and SLP was just a field that really was at the intersection of all of those interests that I had, and health policy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am, after 15 years of school-based clinical experience. So I really did everything that you guys represent, right? So I worked pretty much at all grade levels from pre-K through transition age. I had some jobs where I was just completing assessments. I had other jobs where, I did the full kind of range of duties, from everything from, assessments, treatments, IEP meetings, all the good stuff. I also participated in an autism evaluation team for a few years, so just really specialized in that area for a little bit. But I've kind of backed up to really being just more interested in school-based issues more generally, and with children with language disorders who seem to be really underrepresented in the literature.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back for my PhD just really after COVID. I had a lot of questions, didn't have a lot of answers. So decided that I was in a place where I could go back and start asking some of those questions. So like I said, I'm here to represent you guys. My passion is really advocating for the field and for school-based clinicians to ensure that we're in a place where we can provide the best services possible and our clients can meet those goals that we have for them.
Thank you. I would hazard a guess, but I'm pretty unanimous in this, that I do think that one of the biggest concerns is our caseload and ever growing caseload. And so that really lends itself to talk about group size, and why we do speech therapy in groups. Do you want to get us started? Just kind of talking about school-based therapy
Sure.
and yeah.
Yeah. So a little over, I guess it's been over about 15 years ago now, Brandau and Loeb completed a survey study, and that was really the first look or glimpse at what school-based services look like. At that point, they discovered that the majority of students receive speech and language services in small pull-out groups, so groups of about 2 to 4 kids. So, as part of this study, really our first goal was to really just describe what practices currently look like. And they have not changed much in the past 15 years. So, primarily students. So, I should also back up a little bit. This study included experiences of 273 children with language impairments on the actual caseloads of elementary school based clinicians. So, we didn't have any experimental variables. Really, all we did was we went in and we described what was going on. So we followed 75 different SLPs who
Oh,
were
wow.
so gracious in providing us lots of data, and we were able to really to capture the experiences of over 10,000 individual therapy sessions to see what those look like. So, like I said, it was business as usual treatment. We weren't doing anything to change what the clinician was doing as far as intervention goes. We really just wanted to document what was happening, and so we could start making some connections about what was currently happening and then outcomes for children. So our first step was really just to describe what therapy looks like, right? So what do therapy practices look like? And what we found, they're pretty homogenous. So really similar to that past study 15 years ago, over 70% of children in this study were receiving services in small group pull out. So in a speech room, small group being group sizes from 2 to 4.
I'm just
So again, that was a little over 70%.
so okay. So I just asked in the chat. So those of you that are listening live, what's your average group size? Carrie just said so about. Did you say you had
2 to 4.
2 to 4 is the average of those 70 SLPs that you were polling? And so,
Yeah.
okay, those in listening world out there live, let us know what's your average group size. All right, sorry about that. I just thought that that would be interesting to find.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And I know, a lot of districts had recommended at one way to kind of, I guess, alleviate the shortages of SLPs and the growing caseloads. One way to do that was to increase group size, right? So that's really pertinent to understanding what's happening now and how that can impact student outcomes. So a little over 70% small groups pull out. About a little over 15% of those students were receiving individual services, so just the SLP and the child, but still in that pull-out setting. A little over 6% were receiving services in large groups, meaning 5 to 10 students, and again, that was in that pull-out group setting. And then just a few students, about 4%, were receiving what we called extra large therapy services. But what was interesting about that is that all of those services were inclusive. They were all provided in the general education classroom. So we got to take a look at those 4 different type group sizes, those 4 different makeups. So individual, small group, large group, and then those extra large in class services, and really look at what happened with these kids, right? Over the course of a year, we tested them in the fall, we tested them in the spring, and got to take a look at how they grew over the year.
So I got, sorry, so I had 70% were in 2 to 4, 6% individual, no, 15% individual, 6% in a large group, 5 or more. And then what was that last group that you said? I'm putting this in the
That
chat.
was Yeah, and that may not add up to 100. Those were not exact numbers, but about around 4% were the what we called extra large groups, but really that was inclusive services, so it was whole class.
Like classroom based.
Yep.
Okay.
Push in.
Yeah, that pushed in. Okay, I just wanted that out there.
Yeah.
We are speech pathologists because we are wordsmiths, not mathematicians. That's why we're not engineers. So don't add up the math.
Don't add it up. Just trust
But I
me,
thought,
it's around 100. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm
What was,
looking at
go ahead.
the audience, and it's really a lot of 2 to 4s. Some do, and of course, some have to do one-on-ones as well. But the 2 to 4
Mhm.
seems to be like, I would say, yeah, the average.
Predominant, yeah, yeah. So why do we do that? Like, right? So what is
Yeah.
the evidence behind these small groups, and do we have evidence? So that was a big part of the question here. Is let's describe it first, and then start digging in a little bit.
Hmm.
One thing that was really interesting about those 4 different group sizes was that over 80% of the kids in this study experienced multiple group sizes. So it's not like one student was always in small group,
Hmm.
but most students experienced a few individual, some small group, a large group, an in class. So it was really it was a mix of all of those different types of services, which I think really illustrates kind of the variability that we face in schools, right? So it's not, we don't write in the IEP a perfect picture that we are able to provide every week. It really is, it varies from week to week and based on where we are. Right now we're in referral season. So
Right.
SLPs are spending lots of time doing assessments. And so that might look a little different based on sort of the workload and the time of year, et cetera.
Yeah. So wait, are you gonna lay some evidence on us of why we do groups?
I could try. Well, let's jump to our results. Okay, so let's jump
Okay.
there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then
Let's do
we can kind of back up and kind of fill in the gaps. Okay, so what we found was we wanted to really the big question was, are there any associations between the group sizes that students primarily get or receive? We know that they get multiple group sizes throughout the year, but the majority, what group size that is, and their growth over the school year. And so we looked at those 4 different group sizes. We found that individual, small group, and in class, or those extra large group services were not significantly related to language outcomes, meaning that they really didn't, it just didn't give us any information really. Those kids may that's a big variable to predict that group size. What we did find though was that large groups, so those kids that were receiving uh, some of their services in groups of 5 to 10 students, those children did not make the gains that their peers did who had received other group sizes. In fact, the amount that they had really missed out on over the year was equivalent to about a third of a year of therapy.
Oh.
So those kids really didn't see the gains that their peers did, and again, that about a third of a year that they missed out on. So thinking about cost benefit, things like that. Those kids are going to be in therapy a lot longer, right?
Whoa. So I want, so in that article you found the data that supported the fact that the groups that were 5 to 10, there was a marked decrease in progress. That, because I think as a clinician, as a school-based clinician, sometimes our admin, they don't understand that no, we can't just double, triple our groups and expect the same results.
Right. Right.
There's
And
some
the
data
study
for
wasn't causal. So like I said, we didn't come in and say, hey, we're gonna have, like in some studies where they say this SLP is gonna have a group of 5 and this is gonna, so we didn't set it up in that way where we could say really point to group size is the thing that's causing this, but there's definitely a correlation there. So
okay.
there's definitely some type of relationship, which is important to note for sure. And then you mentioned, so why do we do this? Why and why do we think maybe this was the case? Why did these large groups not perform as well? And the study really didn't look at that, but what we have some ideas about why those students maybe didn't benefit as much, and that's a couple of reasons. One is that their dose is much lower.
Mhm.
So thinking about, when you have a group of students, over 5, 6 students, they all have a range of goals, right? So you've got some that have speech sound disorder, some that have pragmatics, some that are working on their semantic skills. So, you're trying to hit all of those things, right? And just the dose or the amount of time that you're able to spend on their therapy and their IEP goals is just not there. So it's not sufficient for progress. Another thought is that students, when you have so many students, their engagement drops, particularly their active engagement. So the time that they're spending actively engaged with the language materials that you're providing for them is also much lower. So it's related to dose, but there are studies to show that that active engagement piece is very important for language gain for students with language disorders specifically. So that could also be part of the reason that we saw those large group children experiencing fewer gains.
I think it would be, yeah. I mean, I'm going to say that if I was in a group of 10, it would be very easy for me to fly under the radar and be not paying attention at all versus if I'm in a group of 2 to 4, where you would totally be noticed if you all of a
Right, right.
sudden daydream out the window. Yeah.
Exactly. And we know that, 50% of our kids have trouble with attention too. So,
Mhm.
when you've got 50% of your kids who are already struggling with that aspect, and then you add in, double the amount of kids, yeah, that active engagement definitely drops. Um, so the other interesting thing about this, and I won't go into kind of the math behind it, but we really looked at students here who are receiving more than the average in large groups, which was only 5 sessions. So if you think about, so like I said, some of these students received multiple different group sizes, right? So if these students received more than 5 sessions in large groups, that's where we saw the issue. So if you were to say pull in a kiddo one time a year, twice a year for a makeup session or something along those lines, you probably wouldn't see this difference. But if you're providing those services regularly in large groups, more than 5 sessions over the year, that's when you're going to probably start to see this impact.
All right.
Um, so yeah, like I said, we didn't really look at why these large groups caused issues, but we have some ideas. We also had some guesses about why SLPs determine specific group sizes for specific children. So
Yeah.
we thought, well, it could be related to their language severity, or maybe their novel cognition abilities, that they're being grouped, kind of by skill level. We did not find that was the case in this study. We also felt like you mentioned caseloading. We talked about caseload. We
Yeah.
also felt like larger caseloads probably would drive group size. We did not find that in this study either. However, that has been shown in other studies. So we didn't see it here, but that is definitely something that has been shown to be correlated before. So again, not exactly sure why all of these decisions are made, but we can definitely say that the service delivery determinations that we make as clinicians can have an impact on student outcomes for sure.
Right. And I'm going to also say that sometimes not sometimes, a lot of the times, um, school-based clinicians only can pull certain kids at certain times. We don't often have full access to everyone at any time. So,
Yes,
and that goes into play on why we might have, a large group of second graders, because we can only pull second graders
absolutely.
during their specials time, and we just have a big
Yep.
influx of second graders this year. And so,
I am so glad you brought that
yeah,
up. So we guessed that could have been part of the issue here, is that the scheduling restrictions
yeah,
really that are based on, that clinicians face it within the school district, may have been an issue. And I actually did, and am writing up right now a follow-up study where I did some qualitative work. So I interviewed a group of SLPs from Texas, and we talked about these determinations. How do you determine which group size to use? How do you determine where to provide the services? And so some really interesting things are coming out of that. And one of those is the role that the campus schedule plays
hmm,
on SLP services. And I think definitely points toward, in this paper, we really tried to make recommendations on multiple levels. So kind of thinking about speech language services as not, just an isolated service, but really as bigger environment, the school setting, and thinking about ways that SLPs can make some small changes to ensure that they're providing the best services that we can. also some administrative or some suggestions for administrators. And one of those being to increase that flexibility in how we document minutes for one. A lot of times SLPs are required to write, 30 minutes twice a week, or, there's just there's guidelines on how those are written, right? And so just making that more flexible so that SLPs have some autonomy um, around their service provision, being able to go into the classroom, being able to provide some of those short burst sessions if that's appropriate, or maybe some longer duration but less frequent service if that might be appropriate. So we in the paper we did make these recommendations. And like I said, that follow-up study that I'm working on writing up now really does kind of bring to the forefront some of those issues in the environment, those contextual issues in the schools that are really impacting service delivery and those determinations that SLPs are making. And I'm using the word determinations deliberately. I started with SLP decisions. And what I found was these aren't decisions. They really aren't. SLPs don't have the autonomy to make decisions around service delivery a lot of times. So it really does, the context and the surroundings that they're in have a much larger impact.
Right. Because, well, it is an IEP committee decision, for certain, in some respects, but I think we need to be empowered for why we are, what our frequency and dosage is, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and have that autonomy to make those decisions too.
Mm-hmm.
And you also mentioned earlier, and I was going to circle back to, administrators a lot of times will prioritize individual services too, thinking that, oh, that's the gold standard. And a lot of parents kind of feel that way too. That medical model is kind of the gold standard. But interestingly, in this study, remember those kids that were getting that individual therapy, their outcomes were not significant. They were not any different. Really, when we look at mathematically, their outcomes were pretty similar, comparable to small group and push-in services.
Okay.
So I think that's from this study.
So I want to make sure that I heard that correctly. Because as a clinician, if I go back and I'm in a meeting and the parents requesting one, individual, and the admin's like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. You can say, well, actually, studies have shown that there is not a significant advantage of one-on-one individual in progress. And I think I would dovetail that with also, and I know we haven't gotten there yet, so I'm hoping maybe this will get us there too, about the benefit of why we do groups, and that what
Absolutely.
benefits the
Yeah.
student rather. Now,
Yes, you would be exactly right to say that. Yeah.
yeah, and those of you that are like, but I have some kids that have to have individual. Absolutely. I mean, here's the key. Not every student needs 30 minutes twice a week or once a week for 50 minutes, or like there's not a set, it's an individual education plan, right? So we've got some questions coming in. But my
Okay, great.
my thought is that it needs to be individualized for that student. But I want to get to Rebecca's question. For kids who get individual services, is there a
Mhm.
correlation between their starting level and whether they got individual versus group?
In this study, no. So we thought that might have impacted SLP determinations as far as which group size they chose, but that was not the case in this study.
So
Yeah, good
um,
question though.
yeah, and you know what? Thanks, Allison. Is like she wants access to your study. You know what? I should have. Let me see if I can pull up. Yeah, we all want the study now, and that's how I found you. What is the title of the paper?
I think I would know off the top of my head, but hang on just a second.
Yeah. So yeah, you
It's been a
and
few
I.
sleeps. It's called Group Size, an Active Ingredient of School-Based Language Therapy, and that's an LSHSS.
Okay, group size and active ingredient.
Um,
What was the rest of that? Sorry.
of school-based language therapy. sorry, I think I talked over you. An active ingredient of school-based language therapy.
I hope I got that right, but at least it's close. Uh-huh. You know what?
Perfect.
While you, I am going to go get the link for people. I'm going to put that in the chat in just a second.
Awesome.
All right.
And before I forget, let's talk a little bit about those individual
Yes.
services, just because I felt like I always felt like that was put on, like I was pressured to do more individual services because that was sort of, like I said, the gold standard. That had to be better, right? So several studies actually from the field of special education, looking at literacy reading skills, corroborate this information. So they also say, you know what, we're not seeing a difference between one-on-one versus 1-on-3, 1-on-2, 1-on-4. Farquhar Harson did a study not too long ago where she had similar findings for students with speech sound disorders. So not just language, but also speech sound disorders. Those kids seem to benefit from having a small group. So, your question was, well, why?
Yeah.
And we don't know. We don't know, but we have some guesses. So a couple of thoughts that might be driving sort of that benefit of having those peers is that perhaps peer effects are playing a role here.
Yeah. Oh, I think you just froze, Carrie. Hopefully you can hear us. I just got the link for her study. I just put that. Oh no, that's not it, y'all. That's the one I did. Disregard that. Yep, I'm going to get that for you too. But let me get this one while we wait. Carrie's going to get back on as soon. I think she's having some technical issues, but I am going to make a copy of this for her. The paper that is already published. I'm going to get that. So what I just put in the chat, disregard it. Here's the one I want to do. Oh goodness, stay with me, people. Copy and let me paste it because it is such a great article.
And so I was just saying that she did a study looking at, so they looked at the difference between pulling 2 students into a small group, both students having language disorders, and pulling 2 students into a group, one having a language disorder, one typically developing language. And what they found was though that those peer effects were obvious. So having that typically developing peer in the group benefited the peer with language disorder. So one thing that might be going on here is that like I said, we're pulling groups. A lot of times these groups have a variety of goals. You might have a speech sound disorder student with a fluency student with a language student, and perhaps maybe they're modeling for one another. So maybe our language student has really great pragmatic language skills or really great articulation skills, and so they're modeling for their peers. And maybe our student with speech sound disorders or our stutterer is able to model some of those language skills for those students that have language impairment. So we don't know if that's what's driving sort of this benefit of being in a group, but that definitely could be one potential reason that we're seeing, that one-on-one isn't necessarily better. It seems that these peer experiences really play an important role.
And you used a term and I liked it. Did you say peer effect?
Peer effects, yep.
Peer effect.
Yep, and that's kind of a word or a term that's used across the literature. So it's something that we're just starting to look at in our field, particularly with kids with language disorders. But yeah, there's quite a bit of literature out there looking at these peer effects. So we just haven't had the opportunity yet to extend that to our population. So actually part of my dissertation is looking at peer effects. So I was really interested in our results that showed that those kids in classrooms, receiving therapy in classrooms, did just as well as all of the other peer group sizes. And I said, well, what's going on there? So why aren't we utilizing this service more? And what's driving that? Why does that work? So my dissertation is looking at gain for students who are receiving inclusive services. So I'm working with a local school district, some fabulous SLPs who took on the challenge. And so we're also looking at peer effects as being one potential reason or one potential moderator of those language outcomes for students. So I'm excited to see what that shows, and we'll definitely report back.
Because I think it, as clinicians, It's hard for us when we're in a meeting and we feel like we are up against, not up against, but the parent and the teacher and the staff. It's like, yeah, no, we want one-on-one. And then sometimes it's just, we need the words to say, and
Yeah.
that would back us up, with the fact that, and if we could have some studies, thank you, to show that peer effect is actually beneficial. And you said that you're writing, it's not published yet, but you're writing the one that would include, the difference between one-on-one and group. Did I get that right?
No, so I'm looking at inclusion. So I'm looking, so I'm not, it's
Okay.
not a comparative study, but we're following students who are receiving inclusive services and watching their gain.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
But there's are there studies out there that we can direct our listeners to just kind of have them, supported when they're indicating the benefit of small group versus individual? I think that's one of the biggest issues, is really trying to I guess defend it, which,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, this paper will be one that you'll want to have in your back pocket. And then the Farquhar-Harrison paper showed the same findings with or similar findings for groups with for children with speech sound disorders. And so that's noted in that study as well. So we talked about the similarities there. And I before I forget, let me point you guys to my lab's website. So Mary Beth Schmidt's website, who I'm very much honored to be a mentee of. So we have a website. It is, let me pull it up real quick because I'm gonna not tell you correctly and you're gonna get lost. Okay, it is slhs.utexas.edu.
I'm gonna need you to slow down. I'm
slash
trying to write it
research.
in the chat.
Okay,
SL
or I wonder hs dot utexas
U Texas
backslash research backslash CL.
Oh, you actually, I don't know what happened.
CL3.
Okay, I'm gonna pop it in the chat. Will you
Yep.
take a quick? Can you see if I did that correctly?
Yes, I think that looks right.
Okay.
Yep. So on that website, so CL3 stands for Children's Language Literacy and Learning. So that's the name of the lab. So on that website, we have a publications page where this study is linked. So if you don't happen to have ASHA, or if you're not an ASHA member and you don't have access to ASHA journals, you can get it here for free. So we've added the PDF there, and also I created a visual abstract. So that's something that's like a one-page PDF that kind of gives sort of the background and the results, and that really the interpretation of this study in a one-pager. So that's another nice tool that you can use if you wanted to print that off and take that to an IEP meeting. You could use that to show, the findings of the study.
That's what we need. Sometimes we need that hard evidence, unfortunately. But thank you so much. So yeah, I just checked that is the correct, that will get you there.
Awesome.
Oh, it didn't open for
Perfect.
you. It did for me. I wonder. I'm sorry, Allison. Let me try that again. Did that work for anybody else? Oh, I wonder what I did. Oh, now it says
Differently.
weird. When I click on it, it says it can't be reached. But then when I copied it and pasted it in so I just highlighted it, copied it, and put it in my search bar. It came up. Let me see if I can do this another way. Okay.
Maybe just copy it over.
Yeah. Okay.
And actually, there's several studies there that Dr. Schmidt had gone through, and she, there were her studies, but I was able to go back and add in some visual abstracts for some of those. One of those is an intensity study that she did back in 2017, and it looked at types of dose and frequency were really most beneficial.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she found that it was not necessarily twice a week for 30 minutes. So really finding that sort of those shorter duration, higher frequency sessions, like kind of like that burst therapy, that some of us have tried with speech sound disorders, also works for children with language impairment, as well as longer duration but less frequent therapy sessions. So that paper is in there too, and I believe there's also a visual abstract for that. So definitely peruse that website and those visual abstracts. I think that'll give you some nice things, easy ways to print and copy and have that evidence there in front of you.
Okay, when I put it in the chat and go directly from the chat, it doesn't work. But when I put it in separately, copy and paste, try it that way. If someone doesn't mind trying, because I've tried it several times and it does show up. So I hope that will work for other people that way, doing it that way. Oh, perfect, Rebecca. Thank you. Thank you. She's done that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Yay. Yeah, that is a huge takeaway for us all, is to have that data that supports um, the different dosing. And I love that. Yay, Megan, it works. Um, right. Like,
But
it isn't individualized if everybody is getting twice a week, 30 minutes. Not
right,
everybody
and I
needs
think
that.
that this data gives you sort of that ability to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to try something different, because 2 times 30 or 1 times 30, there's no magic to that. That's
Right.
just something that we started over 15 years ago and continue to do for what reason, we're not sure. But we do have some data now to show that, well, some of these other service delivery models and possibilities are pretty feasible, and seem to have decent gains. So feel so if you take away anything, take away some confidence in just testing these things out. So you've got some external evidence. What you need to do is work with those, like you said, those individual students,
Mhm.
build some internal evidence based on how they respond, but definitely feel confident in moving forward with that, and that you're following that evidence.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I just got one of those, like, ugh, as a speech path. What's hard is we're in the IEP meeting that happens once a year, and we are programming for an entire year. And I think that's why we fall into the rut, if you will, of being like,
Mhm.
you know, 2 times 30 or what? Let's just say 2 times 30 for easy math. Um, how would we, then we're thinking like, we need to justify, okay, maybe we do, you know, 3 times 30 for the first 6 weeks, because we're going to be introducing concepts, and then we gradually go down. I'm
Mhm.
just spitballing stuff here as a thought.
Yeah, no, so that's definitely an option. And I think it's really just having the flexibility to write services on a bigger scale rather than weekly or even monthly necessarily. So
Yeah.
if we can write those per grading period or per semester, even annually, I know there's some pros and cons to writing such large chunks of time. But that gives us the flexibility to say, maybe if I want to go in an hour 1 week, but the next week I want to allow those skills to generalize, and maybe just jump in for 15 minutes, that still gives me that flexibility to really individualize those services and still be meeting those minutes that I've promised that I'm going to provide.
Yes. So I was in a district before I moved to Oregon where it was basically, it seemed like everyone got 2 times 30. But then they were talking about, we've got to change that up. The 3-1 model is a great idea as a service
Hmm.
delivery model. But I am hearing, what I am hearing is, when you can put it in, and how they do it in my district here in Oregon, which I love, is they do the minutes per quarter or semester,
Hmm.
whatever, I'm sorry, either quarter or semester. And I love that, because they are going to get their minutes. And then that is what gives us the flexibility on how we're going to provide those minutes. Um, oh, okay. So Megan is saying that she tries to write minutes per week. So 2 times 30 is 60 minutes per week. And sometimes
Okay.
I do 3 times 20 or 4 times 15. Thank you, Megan, for adding that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
just build in some of that flexibility.
right. Because um, that helps us. Well, it's best for the children. It's more individualized, because I love the idea of being flexible. Because if we are stuck with 2 times a week, 30 minutes, right? Um, that's not
You really
works for
box
everybody.
yourself in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
we literally boxed ourselves in. I love that. That's a huge takeaway, y'all, is to start being able to write minutes versus, minutes over a longer period of time, whether it's a week or a month per month. Get on board, get talking with your admin about just a shift. Because just because we've done it this way for, what did you say, 30 years,
It's
doesn't
been a
mean it's
while.
okay. I mean, I do feeding and swallowing. That's my gig. And when I'm talking to a staff member and I'm trying to shape gently, and they're on the clean plate club, and I say, hey, I've got to, let's try something different. And they say, well, I've been doing this for 30 years. I swear to God, I do not say this, but in my head, I say, why do you want to keep doing it wrong? But I don't say that. I do not say that. But I get it when people are just like, but that's how we've always done it. But if we can't say why, the
Mhm.
benefit of it, why, then it doesn't hold water, right? There's no science
Right. And for a
behind
long time, we didn't know any better,
it.
so
Right.
for a long time, and we still don't have a ton of evidence, honestly. We're still just starting to scratch the surface of this. But when we know better, we do better, right? So we know that 2 times 30 isn't right for everyone. So let's move forward. Let's
Yeah. And
individualize those services, and let's make our documentation more flexible to allow us to
And
do
I
that.
and I do think also it's also going to be state to state. Rebecca's talking about, she's in New York, and she's not sure that they let her do minutes per quarter. But let's start asking those questions. Why not?
Yep.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Yep. And start with your district, and even your if you have a speech language coordinator, every district set up a little bit differently as far
Right.
as yeah, how their setup is. But start having those conversations and asking those questions. And really, so some of the takeaways from this paper were also from this study. We're also really geared toward those state level, like legislators and associations, who we really need to stand up for us, and put in place some caseload caps. Right now, only 30 states have caseload caps, or 30, sorry, said that backwards. 30 states do not have caseload caps. So the majority of our states don't have a caseload cap, and many that do don't enforce it. So really having folks at our state level, our associations, and our legislation, our making sure that we have that protection, is something that's critically important. So New Jersey recently, and I hope this is still the case, but New Jersey recently, as a state, decided, hey, you know what? We're going to make a group size cap for SLPs. So they actually do not allow group sizes. I believe it's 5 is their group size cap, which perfectly aligns with the findings of this study. Really, so we really need sort of some of those higher level folks too coming in and saying, you know what, here's what the evidence says. We know better. Let's do better. And let's protect our SLPs and what we know is right and what we know is going to work for our students.
Absolutely. Texas does not have a caseload cap, and I just
Yeah.
my bestie that's still in Texas. Her and her partner have over 100, and oh my gosh, I want to say 120 something kids between, and they have it's ridiculous. And then
Mhm.
now I'm here in Oregon, and there is a caseload cap. However, it's a good idea. We try to stick with it, but we don't also have staff, right? What do we do? Yeah.
Right. Right.
Um, ah,
Definitely some systemic issues, much larger, that are trickling down that we're seeing too.
right. And sometimes, and if you think about, I did a podcast, caseload versus workload, in my last season,
Mm-hmm.
because caseload is just a number.
Number.
It's
Yep.
just a name on your roster. Allison said, "Don't put average in the state mandate caps." Exactly, because workload is very different than caseload. If you are on a
That's right.
campus that has um, like a lot of programs, you have the early childhood, you have life skills, you have the behavior, the adaptive behavior. I mean, you could have a lot of programs on this one campus, and the needs of your students are very different than if you are in a different school that doesn't have all of those programming
Right.
situations.
Right.
And that is something to think about as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and that's another thing, I can recommend is that something that we have control over as SLPs is to use those resources like that Asha puts out, the workload calculators. I know it's a pain. I know it's a pain. I've done it. I know it's a pain.
it
But if
is
we
a
do that,
lot.
then we can show those folks above us and our administrators and the state folks. Then we can show them here's actually what we're faced with, and it's not feasible. So they need to see that, and they need to have that quantitatively documented, just like we need to have that evidence to show that we need to show them, what it is we're faced with, what our workload truly looks like. And like I said, I know that's a pain, but I definitely recommend taking the time to do that
Hmm.
so that you can advocate for yourself.
And I think I could easily go into the weeds because now you've just got me thinking about some really other great topics for some other episodes, being exactly work, talking more about workload and talking about, but I
Mhm.
want to bring us back to our group size because I think this is something that I want everyone listening to be able to take back to their districts about that group size matters, and
It does.
that that there is evidence that shows that extra large groups is not provided the it's not the efficacy of our treatment is negatively impacted by a large group size. And also on the flip side of that, the evidence that is not supporting individualized, um, because the outcomes are not substantial. And again,
Right.
faith free and appropriate in the schools.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Where do we need to go next? What do we need to talk about? Did we
Um,
get, because so we've talked about the influence that it has on the outcomes. I just did that. We did their group sizes, and it sounds like, our listeners are right about that, the 2 to 4. Um,
mhm.
do you want to talk about cancellations?
Sure, yeah, let's do that. So we've got a few minutes. So I said, we were trying to figure out why certain students go into certain group sizes, and one person asked, well, does it have to do with severity? So we didn't find this in this study. We also didn't find that caseload size was the case, and we talked a little bit about caseload and workload, and that being
Oh
caseload as a
no.
proxy actually could have been why we didn't see
Can
those
you,
effects.
Carrie, I'm so sorry.
Uh,
You glitched, and so I didn't get what you just
that's
said.
okay.
So if you don't mind repeating.
Nope, absolutely. So we were, like I said, we were trying to dive into looking at potential reasons why SLPs make certain determinations for group sizes for certain children. So we didn't find that student severity was directly associated with group size. We didn't find that caseload was directly associated with group size. As we just discussed, that could have been because truly workload is not caseload. Those are not synonymous, right?
No.
So that could have been part of the reason there. And we did kind of hash that out a little bit in the paper too. But the one thing that we did find that was a significant predictor to specific case size was the number of cancellations that a child had over the course of that academic year. Prior studies have documented that on average, students have about 10 cancellations per academic year. And what we found was for those kids that had higher or the more cancellations that they had, the more likely they were to be seen in large groups. Which that probably makes a lot of sense to you guys, right? A student misses their group time. You're doing an assessment, have to cancel therapy. You maybe pull two groups together so that you can accommodate for that, right? So, like I said, that's okay to do every now and then, but when that becomes sort of the standard or the general practice, that's when we are going to run into issues and start to see that negative impact. Um, but another thing that kind of highlights is that, ASHA doesn't tell us that we have to make up every cancellation, right? There should not be any broad policy about canceled services and makeup. That really, again, should be an individual decision based on that child and how and their performance and how their progress. So a lot of times, I've worked in districts who have very strict policies about makeup services, but really what we see in the study is that what that does is that drives SLPs to then create larger groups, which we know are not as effective. So really, talking with your administrators, if you're in one of those types of districts who have those really strict makeup policies that are impacting your service delivery on the other end, which it will, it has to. We only
Yeah.
have so much time in the day. So talking to them about this study and showing them, hey, you know what, this isn't really good for kids when I'm trying to pull a bunch of kids together to make up time. Really, it would make more sense for me not to make up those services, or maybe to maybe the makeup services be a shorter session or an in-class session, rather than what we're trying to provide a lot of times right now. So another thing to take with you to talk to your administrators about, and let them know, hey, ASHA doesn't say we have to make up services. Really, there shouldn't be a blanket policy on makeups.
I think what I'm hearing you say really, in what we would say is, it is more important for the actual session to be fruitful, to right, to be more robust, rather
Yes.
than just, I mean, if we're just throwing minutes at somebody, then I'll just go stand in a classroom and count minutes.
Right.
How is that helping a
Yeah.
student, right?
Right.
Versus
Quality over quantity for sure.
that's the
Well,
thing. The quality of the services is going to trump the quantity of the services. And I think that's a huge takeaway. And what you could say to the staff, to the administrators, is that it is more important to have quality services than it is quantity of services. I think that's
and then
huge.
you can right, and you can let them know then that, hey, actually these kids made a third of a year less gain. So think about how much longer they're going to need therapy, how many more years they're going to need therapy if we continue this type of service delivery model. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for the budget. It doesn't make sense for the staff. It definitely doesn't make sense for the kids.
Right. And again, we have to rely on data, data, data. And really, if you think about, compensatory time is only required if there is a lack of progress, or they've lost the progress, right?
Mhm.
That would be a reason that you would, so some students would need to make up because they would not be maintaining their progress. But I think, if working with, I mean, it's just that what is that recruitment, after long breaks, if they're,
Mhm.
kind of an idea. Yeah.
But again, that needs to be an individual decision, right? And SLPs need to have the autonomy to make that individual decision, not to have follow a policy just because that's what we follow.
Right. And if that policy is causing a practice that is not best practice, that we call it out and say,
Right.
what I'm hearing you say is that you would much rather just those minutes being done, but it's not quality minutes. It's a
Right.
waste of everybody's time, and the waste of the students' time away from their typical peers, probably being pulled from a special, maybe art or music, right?
Yeah.
Or they're being pulled from, maybe they're getting pulled from a curriculum, which they desperately need as well.
Right. Right.
Wow, that's heavy.
Lots to unpack.
A lot to
Lots to unpack.
unpack. Absolutely. Um, so yeah, I think, we're charging all SLPs to stand, to come ready to fight for your students' rights, as the Beastie Boys, fight for your right to party, but fight for their rights to have um, services that are beneficial to them, that are providing the outcome. And so, what would you what are practical, what do we need to do? Let's sorry, yeah, as we this is just, yeah, as you
Yeah.
said, it is a lot to unpack, and there are so many moving parts to it. So
Right. Yeah. Like I said, school-based services are complex, and there's just so many layers, right? And they all interact with one another. So it's a very complex system. So I think first of all, we need to track what we're doing. So taking using one of those workload calculators and having a track of, here is what my actual workload is. I think that's a good starting point. Just because we need to know that ourselves, and we need and the folks that we work for need to know that. Then the next step I would say is don't be afraid to individualize services, to truly individualize services. So talk with your administrators about writing or documenting those minutes a little bit more flexibly, maybe by the month or the semester, so that you can individualize. So you have some autonomy in making those decisions, and that can look different from week to week, and that is what individualization looks like. So definitely don't be afraid to try that out. Don't feel like one-on-one is the be all end all. So it's not. We're not seeing that's the case. So if you have a lot of pressure for one-on-one services, feel free to use this study and the Farquhar-Harrison study that I mentioned. And then in the study, there's several other educational studies that are cited, but it doesn't seem to one-on-one doesn't seem to be the best model. And we don't know exactly why, but it seems like peer effects have something to do with that. Um, and then lastly, we talked about cancellations, and not to feel a pressure to make up every single minute of every single session that you miss. It's okay for us to have, our work based on our workload calculator, and what your outcome is. You're probably going to show that you don't have time to do that. So not only does kind of documenting this time benefit you, it benefits your kids, because you know that you're providing effective services, and you're not pulling them into large groups, which might be detrimental to progress for not only those kids that you've had to cancel, but now the kids that you're pulling, who they're adding to their group. Um,
And you just made something flash in my mind, and I think this bears something to be said to admin in a nice way, is that the minutes do a cancellation due to, like, because of your work, of your job, you're doing your evaluation, you're doing a meeting, you're working, right? Or even if you're sick, we our bodies, we're not machines. Um, that the minutes are not yours, like you
mm,
personally. It is These are district minutes. So I think sometimes we feel personally obligated to, Carolyn Dolby, must make up those minutes. And I think that's important to change the lens on that. You know, I'm trying to eloquently say this in a way, but it's probably not coming out. But those aren't my minutes to give.
mm.
They're the minutes that the district would have to make up, because teachers don't come in on a Saturday and do a Saturday class. Teachers have a sub, right? So we don't have subs. So those are not for us to have to make up, I would think. So
Well, and taking care of yourself is important. If we're not taking care of if we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be the best clinicians that we can be. So if we come in sick and we're trying to work that way, or we're burnt out, those are not great conditions for effective therapy either. So
right, and then our response back to the admin that's saying, well, you need to make up your minutes, say, well, put it back onto them, because you're going to say, I've got data here that shows that having a group of over 5, which is what you're asking me to do, actually does not produce the outcome. So it's no better than not having the therapy. Right? Is that mathing? Does that math correctly?
I don't know that it's not. If it's, I don't think that's quite accurate. I think you're
Okay,
still
yeah.
better to. I think they're still making gains. They're just not as the gains are not as strong as
Okay.
had they had been
I
in a small group or
I
in
think I was
class or
bull
in.
in a china shop on that one, so forget what I just said, y'all.
No, you're good.
Yeah, but I think that it is something to be said, that, if we had, maybe doing it every once in a while is okay, but if we were having to do that and it was mandated to do that, then we would have to bring in the big guns and show that we're going to see it very slow progress. And
Right,
our
right.
goal is progress. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't believe we are coming to the end of our talk. This has been amazing. I think I just want to make sure we've got the takeaway that group size, yes, because of peer effect, is what really that supports groups. Not only that, but also that group size actually does matter. and that your study that we finally did get out to everybody shows that that 2 to 4 is sort of that magic number. We're not saying don't do individual, because we know that there are some students that do require that, and there's are some disabilities and eligibilities that may warrant that, and we're not saying not to do that, but
Right.
we are saying that that is not for everybody. And it's
Right.
not just because, and it shouldn't be just because somebody wants it. There should be some data behind why it needs to happen,
Right.
right?
And the classroom-based services are also an option.
And I think we need to change up our service delivery. And I think I'm gonna that yeah, I think having an episode I think would be great on just all the different types of of service delivery models would be a great. So that's something for me to think
Right.
about.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good
What are
one.
the options, right? What's out there? What
And
if I
I
want to
hope
break away from two times 30?
yeah, and I hope it's okay that when your next study, I know you are just writing it now. Maybe I can convince you to come back, and maybe we can review what the results of that study give us some more ammunition.
Definitely.
Okay, great.
Definitely.
I want to thank everybody that has stayed with us today. Thank you so much, Carrie. This has been amazing. I have a lot that I'm taking away, and I'm sure y'all do as well. Thank you so much for coming on to School of Speech. I
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, seriously. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I hope to see I hope to see everybody at the next episode of School of Speech. I want everyone to have a fabulous day, and thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, Carrie, thanks so much. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.